Lena was born into a poor family in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of a bustling city. Her parents worked tirelessly in small eateries, hoping to provide their daughter with a better life. From a young age, Lena dreamed of building a place where everyone would be welcomed with a smile and respect, regardless of who they were or where they came from. Growing up, Lena took on all kinds of jobs to make ends meet and nurture her dream: waiting tables, cleaning hotel rooms, and working as a receptionist. The scornful looks and cold words she had endured became powerful motivation, driving her to persevere without rest. After many years of hard work and learning, Lena managed to convince an investor to believe in her vision. With that investment and her meager savings, Lena purchased Golden Horizon, a magnificent building exuding luxury and hospitality. Lena always reminded her staff of the importance of kindness and respect toward every guest. But recently, she noticed a shift in the hotel's atmosphere. Something was deeply wrong, lurking silently beneath the surface. To uncover the truth, Lena decided to disguise herself as an ordinary guest and walk through the doors of her own hotel. Lena walked through the revolving doors of Golden Horizon wearing a worn-out coat and carrying a faded small suitcase. The sound of her heels echoed softly on the polished marble floor. The hotel lobby still shimmered under the crystal chandelier lights, but today it felt cold and distant in her eyes. Slowly, she approached the reception desk, where a young staff member stood behind an exquisitely carved wooden counter. The receptionist's eyes briefly lingered on Lena's simple clothing and old suitcase before quickly shifting into indifference, her lips pressed together as if weighing her next words, before she finally spoke. Lena placed a credit card on the counter, her gaze steady as she looked into the young woman's eyes. She had prepared herself for this moment, but the coldness from someone she had once trusted cut deep. The receptionist hesitated for a moment before picking up the phone and turning her back to Lena. The brief, whispered conversation gave Lena only fragments of context. When the receptionist turned back, a forced smile appeared on her youthful face. A rejection was delivered, polite but firm, as though she were merely carrying out an assigned duty. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She looked around the lobby. Other guests were happily chatting. Other staff members were bowing and welcoming new arrivals, but everything seemed detached from her, as if she were a blemish on an otherwise perfect painting. Disappointment weighed heavily on Lena's heart, but her face remained calm. She requested to see the manager, but her request disappeared into the cold void of rejection. Then, as if on cue, two security guards emerged from the dim corners of the grand lobby. They approached her with firm, unyielding expressions. Though their words were courteous, their body language and every step they took conveyed one clear message: Lena was not welcome here. Her heart ached as she watched the staff she had trusted stand on the wrong side. She wanted to shout that this was her hotel, that every brick in this building bore her mark. But she knew that, in this situation, any protest would be meaningless. Lena turned around, pulling her suitcase behind her as she walked through the revolving doors once more, leaving behind the glittering lights and cold luxury of the hotel lobby. The weight of betrayal pressed heavily on her chest, but deep inside, a fire of determination began to blaze. She would uncover the truth. She would not let this darkness remain hidden. Immediately after returning to her private office, Lena summoned Robert, the hotel manager. He entered with a nervous demeanor but tried to maintain confidence with each step he took. Lena sat behind her large wooden desk, her sharp eyes observing every subtle expression on Robert's face. She listened as he spoke. His smooth explanations sounded carefully rehearsed. Technical errors, misunderstandings by security staff, and strict protocols allegedly put in place to protect the hotel's image. But every word he spoke only deepened Lena's suspicion. Small inconsistencies emerged, contradictions in his statements, and most notably, his evasive gaze when Lena mentioned Anna, the receptionist. Lena knew she didn't yet have enough evidence to accuse Robert outright, but her intuition told her that something deeply wrong was unfolding behind the scenes. Before Robert left the room, Lena spoke one final sentence: "I will uncover the truth myself, and when I do, be prepared for the consequences." The door closed behind him, leaving Lena alone in the quiet office. The evening light filtered through the window, casting long shadows across her face. She would not let the darkness consume Golden Horizon. 4. Unveiling the secret. 2 days after the incident at the reception desk, Lena's office had transformed into a covert investigation center. Piles of documents brought in by Maya from the hotel's internal storage systems covered the desk, including financial reports, guest booking records, staff schedules, and customer complaint. Maya had also delved deeper into the electronic management system, where hundreds of interdepartmental emails were categorized, filtered, and meticulously analyzed. The first set of data revealed disturbing irregularities. Over the past 3 months, the number of guests denied service had surged without any clear documentation. Most of these rejections were concealed under vague reasons such as system error, fully booked, or guest did not meet reservation requirements. However, when Maya cross-referenced these records with the personal information of the rejected guests, a troubling pattern emerged. 90% of the denied guests were people of color. The data also revealed another anomaly. These room cancellations were frequently logged at the same time each day, mid-afternoon, a busy period when the hotel's lobby would be bustling and attention would be diverted elsewhere. These rejection orders were consistently approved by Marcus, the head of guest relations, the person directly responsible for VIP guest experiences. Digging further into the receptionist schedules, Maya discovered that Anna, the receptionist who had denied Lena service, frequently worked afternoon shifts on days when the number of guest rejections spiked. System notes revealed that Anna had repeatedly flagged guests as inappropriate for the hotel, and each of these flags had been approved by Marcus. On the financial front, questionable expenditures appeared in the guest relations department's expense reports. Items listed as partner commission fees and incident handling costs surfaced regularly without proper invoices or documentation. Some of these transactions had even been processed through offshore bank accounts. A clear picture began to emerge. Marcus had not only established a systemic pattern of discrimination, but he was also exploiting it for personal financial gain. Guests who were turned away often left quietly, but some had filed complaints. These emails, filled with frustration and anger, had been intercepted and blocked before they ever reached Lena. Maya also discovered an email thread between Marcus and an anonymous contact signed with the initials HR. The contents of these emails were filled with controlling directives: maintain the hotel's brand image, remove unsuitable guests, and ensure this issue does not leak. The email address signed with HR did not match any active staff member. However, within the hotel's board of directors, Harold Rains, a senior member with significant influence, was the only person whose initials matched. The investigation's conclusions: systemic discrimination. Guests of color were frequently denied service based on subjective assessments of brand image. Financial misconduct. Marcus appeared to have embezzled funds under the guise of partner commissions and incident handling costs. Protection from above. A powerful figure on the board, likely Harold Rains, was supporting Marcus and helping to cover up his actions. Lena stood by her office window, gazing down at the opulent hotel lobby through the thick glass. Each guest walking through those revolving doors carried a unique story, but how many of them had been rejected, humiliated, simply because of the color of their skin? Golden Horizon had once been a symbol of hospitality and prestige, but now, behind the luxurious velvet curtains, lay a swamp of prejudice and greed. The battle ahead was no longer just about exposing Marcus. It was about dragging the puppet master behind him into the light. Lena realized she was not fighting against one man, but against an entire network of power deeply embedded in the hotel's foundation. But she also knew she couldn't stop now. The investigation documents were carefully packaged. Maya began preparing supplemental reports while Lena started planning her next move. This power game had gone on long enough, and Lena would be the one to bring it to an end. The objective was clear: Marcus must pay for his actions, and the figure behind him would not escape justice. Nightfall blanketed Golden Horizon, with the glittering lights from its windows shining like proud stars. But inside this luxurious castle, an invisible battle was on the verge of eruption. Lena knew she couldn't delay any longer. The evidence she had gathered was undeniable. But before she could expose Marcus, she needed to look him in the eye, hear him lie, and watch him trap himself in the web of chaos he had spun. Marcus's office was on the top floor, offering a panoramic view of the entire hotel. The spacious room was decorated with polished walnut wood furniture and genuine leather upholstery. The heavy scent of cedarwood lingered in the air. Expensive art adorned the walls, but it couldn't mask the cold aura emanating from the man seated behind the grand desk. Marcus leaned back in his chair, sharp eyes fixed on Lena as she entered. He maintained his usual air of confidence, but his hands betrayed him, drumming nervously on the wooden surface of the desk. A glass of red wine shimmered under the dim, golden light on his desk. He lifted the glass, took a small sip, and offered a courteous smile. The space between them thickened with tension. For a brief moment, Lena felt the suffocating pressure filling the room. She placed a thick stack of documents on his desk. Evidence, records of discriminatory practices, suspicious financial transactions, and incriminating email exchanges between Marcus and the enigmatic figure identified only as HR, lay exposed before him. Marcus's eyes flickered over the documents, narrowing slightly. He took a deep breath, then relaxed his shoulders, trying to reclaim his composure. But Lena had seen it, the fleeting flash of fear in his eyes. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The evidence on the desk spoke louder than any words could. Marcus rose from his chair and walked over to the large window overlooking the hotel lobby below. Guests moved about, laughter and chatter filling the air. He stood there for a long moment as though weighing his next move. Finally, he turned around, a faint, tired smile etched across his face. He raised his hands slightly, like a chess player acknowledging defeat, but still trying to maintain a facade of dignity. Lena's gaze was sharp, cutting through him like a blade. She knew Marcus wouldn't surrender easily. Men like him always had an escape plan. In her mind, she thought, "Did you really think you could hide this forever?" The smug smile was gone from Marcus's face. His eyes were now vacant, as though he had given up any attempt at denial. But then he smirked, shrugged, and poured himself another glass of wine, raising it in a mock toast. Lena understood. Marcus wasn't afraid of her. He didn't need to be. Behind him was a shadow, a figure far more powerful, far more cunning, and perfectly willing to sacrifice Marcus to protect himself. She turned and left the office without another word. The door closed softly behind her, but Lena knew the real battle had only just begun. When Lena returned to her office, Maya was already waiting. The assistant's face showed visible concern as she watched Lena walk in with shoulders weighed down by exhaustion. No words were necessary. Maya knew the confrontation with Marcus hadn't yielded any concrete results. Lena sank into her chair, her eyes fixed on the large board on the wall. Photos, charts, and red strings connected various pieces of the puzzle, and every thread led to one name: Harold Raines. Harold Raines was a senior member of the board of directors, an older investor with significant influence. He was known as a gentleman, a philanthropist, and the star of every glamorous charity gala. But behind that polished facade was a cunning fox. The emails exchanged between Marcus and the mysterious contact signed HR had revealed Harold's true face. The scenario was clear. Marcus was nothing more than a puppet in Harold's hands. He had tainted the hotel with discriminatory policies, manipulated financial records for personal profit, and, most importantly, kept everything hidden from Lena's view. But Lena knew that confronting Harold directly would be like running headfirst into a brick wall. He was a master strategist, and one small mistake could cost Lena everything: the hotel, her reputation, and the dream she had worked so hard to build. A plan began to take shape. Lena and Maya wouldn't rush. They would gather more evidence, secure trustworthy allies, and, most importantly, bring the truth to light in a way that was undeniable and public. In the days that followed, Lena and Maya secretly met with former employees who had left the hotel under pressure, guests whose complaints had been ignored, and even a few low-profile board members who still held on to their integrity. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to come together. The day of reckoning was drawing near. In the shadows of private meetings and behind the gilded doors of lavish parties, Harold Raines sensed the looming threat. Lena and Maya's recent actions hadn't escaped his attention. A man who had played the power game for 3 decades, Harold never waited for his opponent's move. He always struck first. Harold convened a private meeting with the key members of the board. those who were easily swayed by promises of power and immense profits. In a luxurious conference room adorned with mahogany wood and classical paintings, Harold calmly painted a picture of a new future for Golden Horizon. With a deep, steady voice, he spoke of Lena's declining management capabilities, delayed strategic decisions, and looming financial risks if the hotel remained under her control. The people around the table were drawn into his story. Hesitant nods and fleeting glances signaled their growing agreement. He presented a detailed plan, a massive investment from an international consortium he had secretly contacted over the past few weeks. These investors cared only about profit margins and global expansion, not ethics or hospitality values. Harold emphasized that this funding would propel Golden Horizon to unprecedented heights, but there was one condition: Lena had to go. Harold subtly planted the idea that Lena was no longer fit to lead. Fabricated mistakes, perfectly doctored from internal documents, were presented as evidence. Greed clouded the judgment of many around the table. Fear silenced the others. Slowly but surely, Harold secured a majority of votes in his favor. To remove Lena legally, Harold needed a plausible pretext: a mistake, a scandal, or an incident damaging enough to shatter Lena's reputation in the eyes of both the public and investors. He ordered a meticulous review of internal financial reports. Old transactions were dug up, every expense of Lena's was scrutinized. Eventually, Harold unearthed an old contract between the hotel and an event service provider with an ambiguous fee labeled as VIP event surcharge. He directed the finance department to discover irregularities. The narrative was set. Lena had misused hotel funds for personal gain. The media would be his strongest weapon. A carefully crafted anonymous letter detailing Lena's misconduct was prepared, ready to be leaked to notorious tabloid outlets. The scandal would spread like wildfire. In a world where public trust is fragile, Harold knew that once Lena's image was tainted, it would be nearly impossible to restore. Simultaneously, Harold began reaching out to longtime partners of the hotel, major suppliers, and potential investors. He spread misinformation, claiming that Golden Horizon was teetering on the brink of financial collapse due to poor executive leadership. As pressure mounted from every direction, Lena wasn't just facing the board, she was now battling external partners and investors. Harold had set a perfect trap. While Lena and Maya carefully pieced together evidence to confront Marcus and the puppet master behind him, Harold made his final move. He issued an urgent summons for a special board meeting. The agenda was publicly declared to discuss financial irregularities and leadership concerns regarding Lena. The words cut deep, striking at Lena's integrity before she could even step into the meeting room. Back in her office, Lena sat motionless, her hand gripping a fountain pen so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The urgent summons lay on her desk. Maya stood beside her, worry etched across her face. Lena realized her true enemy wasn't Marcus. Behind him loomed a powerful shadow, a snake that had coiled itself tightly around the hotel. Boardroom pressure, media manipulation, and external investor threats had all closed in around her. But Lena was not one to back down. She took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with determination. This was no longer a covert investigation. It was an all-out war, a battle of light against shadow. Harold Raines, you've underestimated me. The morning of the board meeting arrived, and the air was taut with tension, like a violin string on the verge of snapping. The boardroom, perched on the top floor of Golden Horizon, offered a panoramic view of the luxurious city skyline below. A long mahogany table, surrounded by glossy black leather chairs, dominated the room. Each chair bore the name of a powerful board member. Lena entered the room, her steps calm, but her gaze razor sharp. Outside, Maya waited patiently, unable to join the meeting, but steadfast in her support. Around the table, the board members had taken their seats. Their gazes wavered between curiosity, unease, and, in some cases, avoidance. Harold Raines sat at the opposite end of the table from Lena, dressed impeccably in a tailored gray suit. His face exuded the calm confidence of a man who believed he was in control. Before each board member lay a dossier, carefully curated evidence prepared by Harold, designed to paint Lena not as a respected leader, but as an incompetent and corrupt executive. Harold began the meeting in a measured but firm voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today not over trivial matters, but to secure the future of Golden Horizon. We must confront the reality of severe financial mismanagement and strategic failures under Lena's leadership. The room fell silent. No one dared to challenge him outright. A few members lowered their heads, avoiding Lena's gaze. Others looked directly at her, their eyes filled with doubt carefully planted by Harold. Lena remained still, her hands clasped tightly together. She knew Harold was playing a dangerous game and that every move had been meticulously calculated. Harold continued, presenting manipulated evidence, an ambiguous financial contract, doctored financial figures suggesting embezzlement, and carefully edited emails implying a lack of transparency. Every word he spoke was like a dagger aimed at Lena's credibility, but she remained composed. She knew that losing her temper now would mean losing everything. When Harold finished, silence engulfed the room. All eyes turned to Lena, waiting for her response. Slowly, Lena rose to her feet, exuding calm confidence. Her gaze lingered on each board member, holding their attention before moving to the next. I built Golden Horizon from the ground up. I know every brick, every wall, every smile that has greeted our guests. I do not need to prove my integrity to anyone here. She placed a thick dossier onto the table. But I will. The dossier contained weeks of relentless investigation, clear records of discriminatory practices, manipulated transactions, and incriminating email exchanges. In the past 3 months, our hotel has been plagued by suspicious transactions and systemic discrimination that have damaged both our reputation and our profits. And who is behind all of this? Her eyes locked onto Harold. The room was deathly silent. Lena opened another folder, revealing email exchanges between Marcus and the mysterious HR. Each email was a hammer blow, shattering the narrative Harold had carefully crafted. Mr. Harold Rains, you orchestrated these unethical acts. You used Marcus to implement your directives, manipulated our finances, and now you seek to make me your scapegoat to cover your tracks. Harold leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. The confident smirk had faded, replaced by a thin, forced smile. These documents are merely one perspective, Lena. Who's to say they weren't altered? Murmurs began to ripple through the room. Board members exchanged glances, doubt creeping into their expressions. But Lena wasn't finished. I've secured copies of the hotel's entire digital infrastructure. Every transaction, every email, every decision has been cross-verified by an independent legal team. Every document I've presented here is authentic. She raised her head, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Mr. Rains, would you like us to take all of this evidence to court? For the first time, Harold was silent. His usual air of dominance had cracked, revealing uncertainty. The tension in the room was suffocating. The board members who had once stood firmly behind Harold now looked uncertain. Some remained silent, fear evident on their faces. Lena took a deep breath. She knew she had shaken Harold's fortress, but she also knew he wasn't defeated yet. The meeting ended without a decisive conclusion, but Lena walked away knowing one thing: the balance of power had shifted. Harold had retreated, temporarily, but the war was far from over. The battle between Lena and Harold Rains reached its most intense stage in court. The documents and evidence that Lena and Maya had meticulously gathered were submitted. The media reported relentlessly, and public opinion split into two opposing sides. However, Harold Rains was not someone who could be easily toppled. With a formidable legal team and an extensive network of powerful connections, Harold swiftly turned the tide in his favor. During the first court session, Harold's attorneys presented a series of documents aimed at discrediting Lena's evidence. They argued that the emails presented by Lena were falsified and that the financial data had been tampered with. They cast doubt on Lena's motivations, suggesting she might have fabricated the entire story to cover up her own financial misconduct. Not stopping there, Harold introduced an independent audit report, one he had, of course, orchestrated. The report claimed that the controversial expenses were legitimate and had been approved by the board of directors. This made Lena's accusations appear vague and lacking a solid foundation. Lena sat in the courtroom, feeling as if the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. Maya, seated behind her, gripped her hands tightly, her eyes filled with worry. Harold's counterattack had been swift and ruthless. Sensational headlines began flooding the news. Golden Horizon owner suspected of embezzlement. Lena, hero or fraud? On social media, public opinion splintered. Some people stood by Lena, but many others began to question her integrity. The fragile trust she had worked so hard to build was starting to erode. The prosecutor turned to Lena, his gaze filled with skepticism. He demanded that Lena produce clearer and more transparent evidence. But Lena knew she had already laid everything she had on the table. The emails, the reports, all of it had been presented. Across the courtroom, Harold sat with a victorious smirk on his face. He had successfully shifted Lena's image from a courageous leader to a questionable figure in the eyes of the public. The court adjourned, but Lena knew she was standing on the edge of a precipice. If she couldn't find a decisive, irrefutable piece of evidence, everything she had fought for would crumble into nothing. That night, Lena returned to her office. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of a computer screen. Maya sat across from her face tense with anxiety. "Do we have any chance left?" Maya's voice trembled slightly. Lena didn't respond. Her eyes were locked onto the scattered documents on her desk, desperately searching for a detail they might have missed. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on Lena's shoulders. She realized that this battle was no longer about reputation or power. It was about protecting her dream, about standing up for justice and the trust she had built. But time was slipping away, and Harold still held every advantage. Outside the window, the lights of Golden Horizon still glittered brightly against the night sky. But inside Lena's heart, shadows began to spread. The crisis at Golden Horizon continued to escalate as public opinion increasingly sided with Harold Raines. Sensational headlines, suggestive interviews, and malicious comments on social media pushed Lena into an increasingly precarious position. The board of directors, already shaken, began considering a vote of no confidence against her. Meanwhile, Lena and Maya worked tirelessly. They combed through every corner of the hotel's data systems, meticulously examining financial transactions and archived emails. They knew that somewhere in this sea of information, a crucial clue lay hidden. Finally, in an overlooked folder, Maya discovered a suspicious transaction, a significant sum of money transferred to an anonymous offshore account, authorized by both Harold Raines and Marcus. The timing of the transfer coincided with the period when many guests of color had been denied service. Maya didn't stop there. She unearthed a string of deleted emails that exposed Harold's deeper involvement. These messages revealed not only Harold's direct orders to Marcus regarding discriminatory policies, but also how he had used these practices as a smokescreen for money laundering through fabricated expenses. This discovery opened a new path. Lena immediately contacted an independent legal expert to verify the authenticity of the documents. After hours of analysis, the expert confirmed the emails and financial records were genuine. This was the irrefutable evidence Lena had been searching for. But Harold wasn't idle. He swiftly convened an emergency meeting with key board members and announced a comprehensive plan to restructure Golden Horizon. He promised colossal profits and global expansion through a partnership with a foreign investment group, a plan designed to distract the board from Lena's accusations. At the same time, Harold collaborated with a major media firm to hold a press conference. He skillfully painted a bright future for the hotel under his leadership, while subtly implying that Lena was holding back progress. In the midst of this, Lena uncovered one final detail. The offshore transaction in question had been processed through a foreign bank account. If she could identify the account holder and link it conclusively to Harold, it would serve as undeniable proof of his guilt. However, accessing this information required cooperation from international banking authorities and investigative agencies. Lena needed to file an official request, supported by extensive documentation, to initiate a cross-border investigation. Time, however, was running out. If Lena couldn't secure this final piece of evidence before the next court session, all the documents she and Maya had gathered could be deemed insufficient. The board would proceed with a no-confidence vote, and Lena would lose everything. Once again, Lena found herself racing against time. This time, the stakes couldn't be higher. The outcome of this race would decide everything. Time was running out. The documents Lena and Maya had were enough to trigger an international investigation, but the verification process for the offshore bank account details was being delayed by complex legal procedures. On the other side, Harold Raines was exploiting every loophole to slow down the process. Amid the chaos, an unexpected lead emerged. A former accountant of Golden Horizon, who had once worked directly under Marcus, secretly reached out to Maya. This individual, now living in a small suburban town, possessed a hard drive containing backups of financial transactions and internal emails he had kept before leaving the hotel. Lena and Maya immediately set off to meet him. The meeting took place in a small, discreet cafe. On the hard drive, they discovered a trove of documents that had never appeared in the hotel's system. These included payment orders signed directly by Harold Raines, along with incriminating email exchanges where Harold instructed Marcus to conceal illegal transactions. However, these documents still needed third-party verification to be admissible in court. Maya wasted no time contacting an international legal investigation firm specializing in financial fraud. They agreed to analyze and authenticate the documents within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Harold sensed Lena's progress. He intensified pressure on the board members and ramped up his media campaign to further tarnish Lena's reputation. In response, Lena decided to hold an urgent press conference. She stood before dozens of cameras in a modest yet dignified conference room. In front of the media, she openly presented the investigation process, the evidence she had collected, and her unwavering faith in the justice system. Simultaneously, Maya received the verification results from the international investigation firm. Every document from the hard drive was entirely authentic. Without hesitation, Lena and Maya submitted the verified evidence to the court and sent copies to reputable media outlets. Public sentiment began to shift. Major newspapers started reporting the truth behind Harold's shadowy financial dealings. The boardroom grew increasingly divided. Neutral members started distancing themselves from Harold, while others began siding with Lena. For the first time since the battle began, Harold Raines was silent in the face of mounting media scrutiny. A vote of confidence was scheduled by the board for the end of the week. Simultaneously, the court accepted the evidence and announced an expansion of the international investigation into Harold Raines' financial transactions. The final battle was approaching, and this time Lena was ready. The day of the final confidence vote arrived. The Golden Horizon boardroom was steeped in tension. Familiar faces of the board members sat around the grand wooden table, each wearing a different expression. Lena, with steady eyes and a composed demeanor, sat at one end of the table, while Harold Raines occupied the opposite end. The meeting began with Harold's speech. He once again emphasized Lena's management failures and painted an optimistic future under his leadership. However, this time his confidence was noticeably shaken. The recent accusations and mounting evidence had severely undermined his once unshakable authority. When it was Lena's turn to speak, she stood up and placed a thick stack of documents on the table. There were no grand speeches or justifications. Lena simply presented her final evidence: illicit financial transactions, incriminating emails, and, most importantly, verification from the international investigation firm confirming Harold's offshore accounts. The room fell silent. A board member in the middle of the table spoke up, calling for an immediate vote. Ballots were distributed, and one by one, each member carefully wrote their choice. Time seemed to freeze as the final vote was cast. The results were announced. Lena had won with a majority vote. Harold Raines was stripped of all power and forced to resign from the board. The court also issued an order to freeze his bank accounts and expand the investigation into his illegal activities. Harold stood up, his face rigid. He gave Lena one final glare before turning around and walking out of the boardroom. The door closed behind him, marking the end of a turbulent chapter in Golden Horizon's history. Outside, the media waited eagerly to report the outcome. Lena stepped out, her face calm and relieved. She didn't give a long speech. She simply said, "Justice has prevailed." In the days that followed, Golden Horizon began to heal. Reforms were implemented, a new team of staff was hired, and internal oversight procedures were strengthened. Lena continued to lead the hotel with her original vision, a place where everyone is welcomed with respect and fairness. Maya stood by the office window, watching the bustling hotel lobby below. Lena walked over and stood beside her, and the two women exchanged a knowing smile. The battle was over, but the journey to build and protect the values of Golden Horizon would continue.